Hey everyone, it's Monica. Welcome back to Homeschool Voices. Today I'm just answering a couple questions that you guys have. A question that I got recently was, why did you decide to homeschool? And I know that's sort of a weird thing. What would make someone decide to do that? I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little different. That's my personality. I don't typically want to do things just based on tradition or what everyone else is doing. I tend to just sort of overanalyze everything, including the school decision for my kids. So it all started with preschool, the decision to do preschool or not, and I said, I'm not interested in sending my 4-year-old to be with somebody else. I think my child will benefit more from being with me, and I think my child will probably learn a lot of bad habits in preschool, so I wasn't interested in that, and kind of just it kept going. I thought that I could teach my kids to learn to read and write and to do basic math, right? That's what they learn in the beginning, much quicker at home and more effectively. So that's what I did, and it's just stayed like that, and there's a million other benefits now that I see, but in the beginning, that's what it was. I mean, I just always wanted to be a mom. It was what I wanted more than anything. And I went to college, did great in school, and I guess I could have gone back and got a master's degree, after I had my son, but it's not something that I wanted. And I didn't have a career to run back to. I just wanted to be a great mom, and to me that was just part of it, is being very hands-on. So that's why I decided to homeschool. The second question is, how do you get enough time for self-care? So basically you have to carve out time, but I think you also need to keep in mind that you need to organize your time in such a way that you don't need a ton of time for self-care, because unless your spouse works from home, you just may not get that time. It may not be realistic to have a lot of time, maybe an hour a week. And as your kids get older, you'll have a little more time. When they're little, you're just on 24/7, and it's hard to have a whole lot of time to yourself. But as they get older, you can get up a little later because they can make their own breakfast, and it gets easier. But the more important thing to keep in mind is to pick your priorities. So for me, with all the other and I teach my a lot of things. They're learning a lot of things, but the biggest priority that I want to make sure I really address and do a great job on each week is writing for both of my kids. Writing. It's the biggest. And if we have done a good job on that, then there's a lot of other things that are on my list, but that's my priority. And then you need to have realistic expectations. So you can have this giant list of all these things that you want to do every week because you've made your curriculum. But if your kids are working diligently, a solid, I say, 4 hours a day, I mean, for younger, my kids are sort of middle-aged, I just don't know that it's realistic to expect a whole lot more out of them. And I'm talking solid 4 hours. That doesn't count lunchtime or breaks or anything like that. So make sure your expectations are realistic. If you've come up with this awesome plan, but it's just really not doable, and you're doing everything in a rushed way, and you're always stressed out because you're trying to do too much, you're going to be super stressed out, and then you're going to need a lot more time for self-care, right? So we want a situation where we don't need so much self-care because we're unnecessarily making ourselves and our kids stressed out. So make sure that you have realistic priorities and realistic expectations for your children and for yourself. And then after you've done that, carve out time. So tell your spouse, hey, I need 1 hour on Saturday. Also, be fair to your spouse because they're going to be tired too. The last question that I had was, how do you pick the best charter school? So I have a whole nother video on that. I will link to it at the end. Make sure you check that out. But basically, if you live in California, if you live in Santa Clarita, I have recently joined up with iLead, ILEAD, and I love them. I meet with my teacher lady once a month. I provide 4 samples, one for social studies, one for science, one for math, one for language arts. It's easy. She likes a lot of writing, so if that would be a problem for you, I don't know, you might want to think about it. But I love them. They provide $2,800 a year for educational funds. Everything has to be approved. So you can't do anything wild with the money. It literally has to be for stuff One problem that I have had, a little problem, was it has to be age appropriate or grade level. So my kids are oftentimes above, like quite above grade level in certain areas, and so they wouldn't approve something that was more than a couple years above grade level. So, you know, something to consider, because that's how public schools are. If you're not in my area and you're somewhere else, what I would do is go on Facebook and I would type in your town. I live in Santa Clarita, so you type in Santa Clarita charter school or Santa Clarita homeschool groups, and you need to join several groups, and you need to ask people, what are the charter options out here? And they know, and they're going to tell you. And so you're going to make a list of those charter options, and then you're going to make new posts in all the different groups. Hey, has anybody joined charter school A, whatever that is? What are the pros and cons? And there will be a whole discussion about the pros and cons of that one. Do it for all of them, right? And once you have the on the ground intel, then what you want to do is go and find the websites for those charter schools, and they will have contact information on there. And then they're gonna put you first in touch with basically kind of like a salesperson. Really, it's like a contact person, and they will answer all of your questions. And that's what I would do. The last question that I had is, how do you know what to teach your kids? That's a very involved question. I'll try not to get too long with the answer, but you could go with state standards if you want, but I don't like that option. I mean, what I think is you need to really take an hour and say, what does my kid need to know by the time to make them college ready, should they want to go to college. And they need to learn how to read well. They need to have a high vocabulary. They need to know basic grammar. They need to be able to spell reasonably well. They need to have a decent knowledge of history. And you need to think about, what does all that mean? Like how much of a knowledge of history do they really need? What is the point of studying history? Literally, just take an hour to think about that. Do that every 6 months and use that as your guide. If that really freaks you out to approach things like that, then you can do state standards. My problem with state standards is that you can, it kind of reminds me of the earlier question about self-care. You can be dragged around like a dog on a leash, you know, like you're just mindlessly following some prescription that somebody else thought out about what children in general need to know, as opposed to thinking about your individual child, which is one of the amazing, beautiful things about homeschooling, is that you can customize an education. So I don't like the idea of following state standards or being real rigid about following them. Maybe using them to sort of inform your decisions a little bit, but not rigidly following them. I wouldn't do that personally. Because, for example, I said my big goal this year is teaching my kids to write, and to write well, especially my 12-year-old to write well. And then I have and then math comes up as pretty important to me. And then I have all these other cool things as we have time, and we do have lots of extra time. It gets filled in with this history book and that history book and this logic book and this science, you know, it's like a unit, this science unit and that science unit. It gets filled in with other things. And I have yearly goals that are a lot more involved than, you know, writing. But I would sit down and make your own goals based on what you know. And maybe you didn't maybe you didn't have a great education, like really didn't have a great education, and so maybe you should look up state standards in that case, just to give you sort of an idea of what kids are doing at certain ages. If you guys have any more questions for me that I didn't get to, please put them in the comments below, and we'll have a discussion down there. I hope you like this video. If you do, please click thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. In the meantime, happy homeschooling and have a great day.